Up to this point, much of what we have discussed could apply at least in spirit to other AI systems. This video marks a turning point. Quantum systems are fundamentally cyber-physical. At this layer, traditional software security assumptions begin to fail. You cannot simply patch physics. Behavior is not deterministic, and subtle changes can have disproportionate effects. This is why hardware, firmware, and accelerator integrity, they deserve their own control domain. Quantum vendors rely on specialized control electronics, firmware-driven timing and pulses, GPUs and FPGAs for real-time decoding and control, hardware accelerators tightly coupled to software logic. If these components are compromised, everything above them becomes untrustworthy and detection is extremely difficult. So this is the deepest trust layer in the system. I'm Nupur Mitra, a legal and governance risk translator for AI systems. And on my channel, The AI Law, I unpack how AI security flaws, governance failures, and model behavior, they all turn into real legal exposure, rights issues, and the future of jurisprudence. The core risk is not just downtime. The core risk is silent correctness failure. If hardware or firmware, they behave incorrectly, results may look plausible, errors may be attributed to noise, and customers, they may never know that the outputs were compromised. So that is existential for a quantum vendor. The goal of hardware and accelerator integrity controls is to ensure that only approved firmware and bitstreams run. Changes are intentional and traceable, and behavior can be attested to a known state. This is about trust at the bottom of the stack. Control 1. Secure boot ensures that firmware and bitstreams are verified at startup. Unauthorized code cannot execute. For quantum systems, this may apply to control electronics, FPGA-based decoders, embedded controllers. Even partial secure boot coverage is better than none. Control 2. Firmware and bitstreams, they should be cryptographically signed, verified before execution, because this prevents accidental deployment of incorrect images, malicious tampering, rollback to vulnerable versions. Unsigned firmware should never run in production systems. Control 3. Firmware updates must be deliberate, reviewed, and logged. Ad hoc updates are dangerous. Controls should include approval workflows, version tracking, rollback plans. This is especially important when firmware interacts with machine learning-driven control loops. 4. Where possible, systems should support attestation of firmware state. Verification that expected images are running. Even limited attestation, they increase confidence, they aid incident response, and they support customer assurance. Perfect attestation is not required. Progress matters. Control 5. For shared accelerators, isolate workloads, avoid cross-tenant leakage, and prevent residual state exposure. This is particularly important for GPU-based machine learning training and shared FPGA pools. Isolated failures here can undermine both confidentiality and integrity. Control 6. Because detection is hard, monitoring matters. Indicators may include unexpected performance changes, unusual error patterns, and timing anomalies. These signals are noisy, but trends matter. Monitoring should focus on deviation from baseline, not absolute thresholds. Control 7. Hardware eventually ages, is pre-purposed, or decommissioned. Controls must ensure firmware is wiped or reset, sensitive data is cleared, and access is revoked. Old hardware is a frequent blind spot. Control 8. From a compliance perspective, it is not enough to do these things. You must be able to document firmware provenance, show update logs, demonstrate control ownership. Evidence matters as much as implementation. This layer is often neglected because it's complex, it involves multiple teams, and it's not purely security or engineering. But attackers and regulators don't care about organizational boundaries. If this layer fails, everything else fails. Hardware and accelerator integrity directly mitigates decoder compromise, silent correctness failures, supply chain attacks via firmware, control plane manipulation. It is the foundation that makes higher level controls meaningful. Many organizations, mind you, implicitly trust hardware because it comes from reputable vendors. It just works. Trust is not a control. Hardware must be governed like any other critical component. So in this series, we've now secured data, models, software supply chains, and hardware foundations. Now, the next episode of the series will address platform and cloud security, where customers and collaborators, they actually interact with your systems. That's where we go next. If you work on AI, security, or law and want to understand what actually gets you sued and what should change, you are in the right place. Subscribe to my channel. This channel analyzes AI security legal risk, AI liability in practice, and AI governance compliance risk. We look at how AI system design, architecture, and runtime controls, they create legal risk in AI systems, AI model vulnerabilities and compliance failures, AI runtime controls and legal exposure, and how AI tooling risk translates to law for developers, security engineers, and governance teams.